Thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for this wonderful film. We don't have long. I'm going to kick us off with a few questions, and then we'll go out to the audience. So think of some good questions. Tim, I'm going to start with you since you're sat right next to me. This film, the audience might not realise, was shot chronological, and that's not a sort of standard practice for shooting films. And I read in a sort of interview piece you did recently that you wanted to approach this in an unconventional way because it was an unconventional script. Can you explain that to us and why shooting chronological was so important?
It's just Cillian who suggested it. It's all
really?
pride and glory for that because he done it with Ken Loach. I heard about it, that people did it, but I never dared to ask producers to do it. But he's a producer, and he said, like, Tim, let's do it. I said, okay, why not? And it's something I really recommend to any director. It brings so much extra to the table.
Amazing.
Absolutely.
And what were some of those extra things?
I think you know where you came from. That's one. And actually, if you dive deep in a certain scene, you have to go deeper in the next one. Yeah. There's no going back, and that's something I really enjoyed. So yeah. Excellent.
And Max, this is, for anyone who's not aware, this is a sort of reimagining of your novel called Shy. It's quite an obvious observation, but the film is called Steve. So can you talk us through the sort of shift in perspective, and was that something you really wanted to do, and how did it change and develop the story for you?
I just have such a knack for titles. I thought, what next? Well, the novella is entirely in Shy's head. It's in the weather system of his own mind, and it's very polyphonic and lots of flashbacks, and it's very textured in the surface. And actually, really, the only use value of that novella for us moving forward was for Shy. And Jay used it almost like a Bible on set. I wanted to write another film. I wanted to write a film for Cillian, and B, we had been talking about what the sort of subject matter we were interested in was, and it kept coming back to this question of care, interdependence, community, compassion, heroic but broken people, vulnerable boys. So when I said, how about the teacher, Cillian was really keen on it. So for me, it's not so much an adaptation as a complete rebuilding, as if they're sort of sibling, living things in the same ecosystem, but siblings in some way, yeah. So it was a delightful challenge for me.
It's a really lovely way to put that. And Cillian, I read that your parents, from education background, worked as teachers. Was that part of the appeal for you? And were there any sort of personal experiences or just informed knowledge that you brought to this part?
I think that only happened kind of retrospectively, as like the impulse was to work with Tim again, and then to dream up something else with Max again, and then when it became, we decided on the novella, and then making it kind of, it's sort of a dual perspective. It feels like to me, it's like those two. It's like Shy's world and Steve's world kind of overlapping, but they can't reach each other. It was only then when I began to really reflect on my own upbringing, which was raised by two teachers who were both like working and then, spending all that time in front of these kids, like 35 teenagers every single day in, day out, and then coming home to four of us and looking after us. You know that thing when you're a pupil, you just like, your teachers' lives end at 3:30 when the bell goes. Yep. But they don't. We know they don't. And I suppose I lived in the aftershock of being a teacher with my parents. And I realized that it's a calling, that it's a vocation, that if you're going to do it well, it requires something deep. It's a deep commitment. And I think making this film has really. My parents are retired a long time, and I don't think I fully framed the kind of the dedication they gave to their job and to me and to my siblings until I made this film.
Yeah, I think the film really does. I have a teacher in my family, and I just can think about so much. Is there any teachers in the audience tonight? Oh, a few. I bet you're really feeling it. Jay, Shy is obviously such a pivotal part in this film. How did you come on board the project? I've heard there was a bit of an extensive casting process.
Yeah, 3,500 boys auditioned for Shy. I remember I'd got the audition through, like any other audition, but I realised that it was my dad's work. My dad works in alternative educational units.
Wow.
So straight away, I ran to his office. I said, Dad, we got to talk about this. And it's the same thing. Retrospectively, it was something that my dad had been doing since 2009. So all of a sudden, we're highlighting him and his unpredictable environment that he goes into every single day. My dad was a big part of this, you know, and I ended up chatting to him. And after that, we got into doing 3 rounds of auditions. So I met Tim on the 2nd round. I had the chemistry read on the 3rd, where I met the boys.
Yes.
And then from there, we had the workshops for 2 weeks where I felt like I was back in school. But yeah, and then we just went on this incredible journey all together.
Amazing. I do want to hear more about the sort of workshops and rehearsal process. And Tracey, I wonder if you could speak a little bit about that, because the thing about the performances in this film is, you know, it almost has that kind of Robert Altman naturalism quality where it's like overlapping, all that sort of thing. How was that as a sort of approach in a working environment for you to navigate?
Well, I've always wanted to be in a Ken Loach film. That's how I started watching. I remember, you know, Kathy Come Home and all those sort of things in the, you know, 60s. And Cillian's texted me and said, can I speak to you? And I thought he was going to ask me to do a charity gig or something. Where, you know, and he didn't. He sent me this fantastic script, and because you and your wife had heard me talking to
No, it's all Yvonne.
Yvonne. Thank you, Yvonne. Thank you, Cillian's wife. And then anyway, so then I met Tim and I got involved, and my son-in-law had read Max's book, and then it was very workshoppy, experimental. At first I was put in a room with all the boys you'd all been together for 2 weeks, and they were feral, and I was terrified, and nothing really frightens me. I think, oh, I've done everything, you know, what am I going to do? I can handle these people. I was like, I remember coming outside and you went, have you been in there with them? Have you been? I was like, yes, I done. I said, we've got to take charge of these boys, and I love boys. And I'm a mum and I'm a grandma now, and I just knew we had to take charge. And then, you know, we got to know each other, and then I think I was very motherly. My character's very motherly. She describes herself as like, I'm a part matron, I'm a prison guard, you know, and I felt that way. But it was a struggle. The whole thing was a struggle. We're struggling in this environment, and it was kind of emotionally exhausting.
Wow. And Max, were you part of this process as well, in terms of like working with the cast in finding that naturalism, you know, part of your script? Were you rewriting or working with improvisation?
I'm a very lucky boy because everybody was involving me at every stage.
Oh, that's great.
Right down to the props people would ring me at 7 a.m. and say, we're really sorry, we can't get that Wu-Tang poster for Jamie's bedroom wall. Would it be okay to have a Nas poster? I'm like... I wrote dialogue constantly at strange times of day. I spoke to all of the actors individually and asked them if they were happy tonally and in the details. And the boys particularly would say, I feel it, but could I actually be a bit shy, or could I be Cornish? Or, you know, really like down to in their kind of socioeconomic, but also their cultural taste, so then we wrote these interviews, and Tim had this extraordinary idea that he would edit the interviews in so that the boys were all the time under the eye of, as it were, the main camera, the cinematic camera, but also the documentary camera. And Tim will tell you more, but he came up through documentary filmmaking. So the gaze that you have on the boys, one is their opportunity to perform, and one is this extraordinarily tender look at as it were, their true selves. And I was writing dialogue throughout. So it had this, for me, as a novelist where everything is locked, and you say goodbye to it, and it becomes a product, which is in many ways to the anti-capitalist among us rather disheartening and disquieting. Extraordinary. The whole thing was so alive. And then the fabric of therefore there's a kind of novelistic texture to the film because of the way that Tim decided to solve the problem of this script, which was problem. But it was a very unconventional draft.
I really want to hit upon you saying sort of the talking heads, the interviews. So that wasn't part of it, and that was a workshop exercise that became part of it.
Yeah, like I said, I got the script was very unconventional and was great, but I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
I really didn't know how to do it, and now because I was still mixing small things like these and in post production, which is totally different, and but around that time I was going through footage I was shooting constantly when I was young. I always get a camera in my hand, and I was going back to the footage from the 90s just because I was in the midlife and I want to see people who passed away again. And I felt like, oh, everyone's seen the film right now. I think like, who's the documentary maker? And I always was thinking like, Steve's daughter is going through this footage right now.
Yes.
And I saw the value seeing my father, who's not the same anymore, talking to the camera, and then closely after that we went into doing castings, and I asked Max like, can you write an interview of the boys, because I couldn't go to the room, and he wrote it out very quickly, and we started with the boys, and then I said like, I love one of Shy, and he said like, I can't do it, and I did it, and I was very emotional, and that's in the movie right now, and I said like, Max, you have to face it, and I have to do it, but Steve. That was like the last one you did, but it was kind of an obstacle for you to do it, right? And it was quite emotional. But you sent it to me, and I read it for the first time. I was, oh fuck.
Tim is such a joyful collaborator, so I'd send him this thing, and I'd be like, well, have a go at this as well. So look, it's a work of genius. But the thing is, for me, it's like every love story is a ghost story. So what this allows is for the characters to already be haunting themselves in a way. So the documentary footage becomes this sort of archival or legacy material, which begins to kind of, almost shine a kind of hauntological lens on the primary footage. And that for me, texturally and emotionally, that's very, very rich, a rich scene.
That's incredible. Cillian, this is the sort of your second collaboration with Tim, with your producer hat on, or your feature film producer hat on.
Mm-hmm.
Moving into producing and your company, Big Things Productions, what was your sort of motivation into moving into producing, and what are you looking for in the sort of films that you've been making?
I think there's a thing when you're an actor, you know, you turn up, and like the two cardinal rules are turn up on time and know your lines. It's not that hard. And you know, I enjoyed doing that for a long time, and I worked really hard at doing that. And then when we were making Peaky, because it went on for so long, they very kindly eventually gave me a producing credit on that, and I began to get a seat at the table and began to be involved in the other aspects of it. And it's deeply collaborative. I love collaboration, and I'm probably really nosy and annoying as a person. It just felt like a natural kind of, if you're kind of curious and nosy and annoying, it kind of is a sort of a natural evolution to kind of want to get into that world. And I love also putting people together. Like I had an instinct that Tim and Max would work really well together. It was just an instinct, and I don't know, in terms of the type of work, that gets formed, I think, very early through the films you watch and through the books you read and through the people you work with. So it's an ever-evolving process of trying to make stuff that interests you, and mostly it comes from a place of friendship and recollaboration. And friendship and collaboration to me are adjacent. Yeah. They pretty much have the same components, you know, which is trust, care, affection, you know, shorthand. They're the same thing.
All part of that unit. It sounds like it really comes across in hearing you all speak about the collaboration and the sort of sparks of connection. It's really fascinating to hear about. I want to go back to what Max was talking about earlier in terms of bringing stuff to the character. And Jay, what was that for you? So when in these sort of exchanges of, oh, could Shy do this? Or I feel like Shy's like that. Like, what was coming out for you that made it into the film?
I just think that this is a universal topic. I think all of us are really struggling with mental health every single day. So when I first read Max's book, I just felt so seen, So it wasn't necessarily a thing of what I was bringing. It felt like what I was already feeling, and almost just being, how vulnerable could I be with everyone else? And I feel like the conversations with this dude over here and with Tim, I just felt so safe, man. I feel like they don't look at us as actors, but more people. And they look at our fragility and our struggle. And from our first conversations, I just felt like I'm gonna be okay, you know. You know, they're gonna throw a safety net, and if I fall, they're gonna catch me. So
That's beautiful. And Tracey, just going back to sort of the improvisation, I read that the "it's not your fault" bit was a bit of improvisation. That was part of
Yeah, it
yourself.
was. That was
Can you talk us
didn't know that.
through?
really. It was just that's Tim just giving you so much time and freedom, and that scene was kind of late at night, wasn't it? And it was just I've never been allowed to go into a scene really in a way by any director and just like take as much time as you want. And you know, I keep saying it's like, 'cause I go in and I go, okay, do this, and it's always like there, and then we're going to get that, and then you know, it's also sometimes it's also vanity filmmaking, and it's you know, the little pickings around, and then decided to really hammer home to Steve, I know what's going on, it's not your fault, and just really went on, and then I did another take, and you said just take even more time and really go at him. You said, I want you to make him cry.
Wow.
And I couldn't quite do that, and you were like retreating into the corner of the room, but just to like call you out, and it was such a gift to do that scene. I just loved it, and you made it possible, and it just felt so magically real, and I loved it. It's tough.
Amazing. I really want to hand over to the audience, but I am going to be a bit selfish because there's one burning question I still have, Tim, and that is about the absolute spectacle of a sort of sequence in the shot in the field with, I think it's like a drone shot. Can you talk us through the sort of inception of that as an idea and the delivery and how you made it happen?
I think it's Max sent me a lot of drum and bass, which was not my favorite kind of music back then. But
He likes it now.
but what I always do, if I know that's the music of the movie, I put it on while I'm sketching ideas. And I was always playing in the back, so I was kind of storyboarding, and that's what I saw. And I was also a visual idea to connect Steve and Shai. I was always how can I bring them visually together? Where you also later see with the water, it's always attempts of ways I can try to bring them together. And that was just the music brought me that idea, and get inside these boys, the energy, the craziness, the chemicals going through their bodies, and that's how it came about.
Yeah, and the effects are sort of in camera.
I can't say that.
All right, keep your secrets.
Tim, it's the BFI, we can all talk.
He likes his secrets. I love it.
I think what's quite important, and that's so nice to have Cillian as a producer. He understands that you need rehearsals for this to get the boys together, and it's money, it's time, and that's so it's necessary to do that. So what we try to do during these rehearsals is try to understand the character and how they're looking at each other. And Max was there; he knows the story better than anyone. But we were also listening to the boys themselves. I think Max said, and we had sessions one-on-one where I asked the boys to bring like 5 pictures that were very important in their life as a starting point for a discussion. So I was also vulnerable to them. They were vulnerable to me. They were vulnerable to each other. And then we did improv sessions on the different relationships. And then the heart came out, and we trusted each other all the time. But there's also some naughtiness. In directing these boys, you have to insult them too to get somewhere. But I think this 2-week workshop brought us together as human beings, and not necessarily as actors and directors, but as a group. And I think that if we wouldn't have the time to do that or the opportunity, we wouldn't have this result.
Excellent. And do you want to add anything, Jay?
Yeah, I think from an actor's perspective, I mean, for example, when we were doing the chair scene, we were workshopping it, really. I mean, me and Tim, we choreographed it. We had one meeting just beforehand. And then we just really went for it. And, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, there was a bit of a bruise that I got one of the fights over the chair. He definitely won, but, you know, it's safety. You know, you got your stunt team, you're literally offset, smashing the chairs, seeing how it's going to work. A dude called Martin, actually, stunt guy, was showing me how to actually throw the chair, so we're going to be okay. But sometimes you just got to go in and see what happens. But as I said, if you go too far, Tim's going to get me, you know.
I think during
And tell me off.
During rehearsals, we did something amazing. We were kind of improvising. They were in some kind of zone, walking through space, and I was just sometimes yelling words or ideas. And I said, "Steve just died."
It was awful.
Whoa.
And the reaction of the boys was, "Wow!" So they've been to places already, and so that was therefore it was easy to work with them.
You know, talking about things getting out of control, I remember the scene with the MP and wonderful Roger Allen, which is like, when you read it, you think, oh, this is funny. To me, on the day, it was just heartbreaking that this is how it's ended up. And he was really scared.
Yeah.
And you rarely see an actor of Roger Allen's stature. And after the first take, and everyone ran after him, like you say, this unruly tribalism. He went, what? I could saw him as an actor, and as a man, he just went, this is really what's going on. And I felt like going, yeah, I was like that day one, mate, like day three, mate. But I've never seen an actor that, and then I'm sure you assured him, but it was kind of wild at times. I've never seen anything that wild, just to say the improvisational, scary quality of it.
And that was the way I think that stuff evolved, because I remember you'd read that in the script, you think, that is a brilliant line. And that is, we all feel, well, a lot of us feel that. And but when Jay delivered it and we did it in the room, it wasn't funny, it was just
No.
it wasn't
Very
so
tense.
fun. It was
Very
like these two like forces that, and this huge class gap, and it was just like this chasm and this awful. It was just awful.
What was the line?
Yes,
What was the
Maybe we'll
beautiful
see.
line that we cut?
Oh no.
The electric bridge of sadness.
Oh yeah.
In the script, it says brackets. Shy looks at Steve. Steve looks at Shy. There is an electric bridge of sadness.
Available in the novel.
I mean, it's a travesty.
On
Sabre.
merch table, Max Porter,
in the lobby.
merch table.
Or on Amazon and
DVD, Where are there more royalties, books or DVDs? I don't know.
You may want to go.
But you know, the point is
Death
that,
is grief
is that,
as
is
well.
that's what Tim enabled, is this voyeurism almost. This sort of patterning, because as Tim's saying about the boys, like this exercise he did, you know, Jamie, what do you think of Ash? Ash, what do you think of Paul? Paul, what do you think of Tyrone? Stuff that is absolutely not in the script, but is so felt in the way that those boys regard one another, in the way that Steve is the weird kind of conductor of this chaotic orchestra. I think it's felt. It's a bit like when a novelist does loads of research that shouldn't and doesn't end up in the final draft, but is absolutely understood to be there by the reader.
Amazing. Fortunately, I think that's all we have time for, which is a good note to end on. Buy the book. Tell your friends to watch the film. As I said at the start of the evening, this film is in cinemas from Friday, and it will be streaming on Netflix in October. But in the meantime, please could you give a very warm thank you to our panel.